Hello everybody, powfu here with another build video. So this is going to be an updated build for my Scourge Dragonknight build, but it's going to have subclassing. So it's good for duels, battlegrounds, open world, and 1vxing. It has way more survivability now than it did before, has more damage and sustain. So let's get into it. Let's look at our stat sheet. So when we look at our stat sheet, we have about 1400 magicka, around 31k health, 27k max stam. For our recoveries, we have close to 1600 magicka and around a 1420 stamina recovery. Our weapon spell damage is going to be around 4478. Our critical strike chance is going to be 24%. Our penetration is going to be around 9k. Our resistance is going to be around 25k on the front bar, and then about 1900 for the critical resistance. Now, for your attribute points here, you can put them all in the stam. However, as long as you have around 28k to 32k health, you can play around with it as much as you want. But remember, 28k to 32k health is the perfect threshold for PvP. Then we are running the Atronach Mundus. Now, since we're running dual wield and a sword and shield, we can't heavy attack for magicka if we need it, so it helps maintain our mag resource. We also run Jewels of Misrule for the food, because with Jewels of Misrule, we get both mag and stamina recovery, which helps maintain our resources. And then for our race, I still run Imperial, because Imperial, in my opinion, is still one of the best races for PvP, especially for Dragonknight. Now, with the max stam and health you get from this are nice, but the 6% reduction for all your abilities is amazing, because that counts for ultimate, health, stam, and mag abilities, while counting towards your core combat abilities like block, sprint, and roll dodge. So let's look at our sets now. On our front bar, we have dual maces with one nerned, one charged, one with flame enchantment on it to help proc our combustion passive on our DK skill line, and physical damage to proc the Sunder's Daz effect, which gives us 100 weapon spell damage and applies minor breach to the target, with some stamina in return. So now we are still running Pyre Brand, just like the last build here. It gives us 2 lines of weapon spell damage and a line of penetration, but when you light attack, you apply a flame dot, which lasts 6 seconds, and there's no cooldown for it, so you can keep applying it to many targets and as many times as you want. But also, when you heavy attack, your fully charged heavy attacks consume up to 3 of your damage over time's effects to deal an X amount of flame damage in a 6 meter radius on the target, dealing up to 200% more damage to enemies below 33% health. Now, the damage scales off your weapon spell damage and is increased by 20% for every damage over time you have on the person, up to 60%. So we aren't using the explosion here on the build. You can weave it in with your stun, but I mainly just use it for the light attack because I prefer pressure builds versus burst builds, especially on Dragonknight, because you can block abilities like Dizzy Swing, Merciless Resolve, and even Dragon Leap, but you can't block dots. And when you're fighting against good players are going to block your combos a lot. So when it comes to dots, it helps offset that a little bit, in my opinion. Well, next on our sword and shield bar, we have Daedric Trickery, but we are running poisons though. And this is one of the best poisons here. I actually created a YouTube short about PvP poisons if you want to check it out. But with these, we have double dot and stamina drain. So the stamina drain is what really messes with people, because when they're already having a hard time to heal already, which you'll see further in the build here, they have to worry about their resources. And on top of the damage pressure that we have, this is going to be a good combination, especially with the skill that we're using to do a combo with. But with Daedric Trickery, I moved away from Kind's Marchers because in this patch you're just taking way too much damage, because you have people using Sub Assault with Merciless Resolve and Incap. You need to have some way to compensate for it a little bit. So Daedric Trickery, I think, does that for us here. It gives us a line of health, stam, and magicka. And then you will get a random buff for 21 seconds, and you get a new buff every 9 seconds. You get Major Expedition, Protection, Mending, Heroism, and Vitality. Now, we already have Vitality on the build, which is okay, but if you don't like being able to get Vitality multiple times, because that can happen, it's unlikely, but it can happen, then you can move to Rallying Cry. Rallying Cry is also another good selection. Then for our next set here, we have Gerald's Mountains War Chief in Heavy with a Tri-Staglyph Impenetrable on it. And I would say this is one of the strongest PvP monster sets. And also in most situations, I would say this is stronger than Balarg. So it gives you a line of weapon spell damage. Okay, and then when you are dealing damage, you apply a stack of melee to your enemy, reducing healing received by 1% for 5 seconds, up to 35 stacks. You can apply a stack once every 0.5 seconds. And then applying melee gives you a stack of contagion, reducing your healing received by 1% for 5 seconds, up to 15 stacks. You can only gain a stack once every 1 second. So to put it simply, as long as you deal any kind of damage every 5 seconds, eventually the target will have 35% less healing, and this can be applied to multiple people while you have a 15% debuff on you. Now, on a dot build, you're always going to have this up at all times. There's going to be no problem there. But we also have major and minor defile on the build. So that will equal out to 53% less healing for every target that we fight. And the way we're getting our major minor defile is going to be in the form of an AoE. So it's going to be applying to multiple people. It shuts down fights really fast. Battlegrounds healers with 30, 40, 50k health, they eventually go down. It's not a problem here. And now the only thing I will say about this set is you will get some negative messages from certain players that you're fighting against once you beat them with it. This is not a very popular set to run in PvP because people think it's cheesy, but regardless of that, it's functional, it works, and I like the play style of it. Next, we have a heavy chest piece of trainee with a tri-stat glyph and reinforced. Now, we have a free spot here for extra health on the build, so we might as well just put it here for trainee. You can't go wrong with it. Next, we have shoulders, heavy shoulders of Gerald's Mountain War Chief with a health glyph impenetrable on it. Next, we have a light sash of Daedric Trickery with max health and impenetrable on it. Then we have Pirate Brand Medium with a max stam glyph, impenetrable. And then Heavy Greaves of Daedric Trickery with a tri-stat glyph with reinforced. And then finally Heavy Sabatons of Daedric Trickery with max stam and impenetrable on it. Now, you can play around with this as much as you want here. You can run, I preferably run 5 heavy, 1 light, 1 medium on a lot of my dot builds. But if you want to run more medium, you can. I just wouldn't run maybe more than 2 or 3 pieces of light. I would just mainly play with the medium and heavy pieces there. But next for our jewelry. For our jewelry, we have a Pirate Brand ring and a necklace. One with a stamina recovery enchantment and the other with a weapon spell damage enchantment. Both are going to be bloodthirsty. So the golden rule here is unless your build is building for pure weapon spell damage, bloodthirsty will always be better. And it helps way more with dot builds than it would be with infused. So since it becomes harder for your target to recover, especially if they have anti-heal on them when your dots are on, it makes more sense to run bloodthirsty because they'll be hanging around more 30, 40, 50% health than they would be 80, 90, 100% health. And then for our last ring, we are still running Malekith's Band of Brutality. I've tried out the other mythics still, Sea Serpent's Coil, Satan's Seducer, Markin. The only one that comes close is Sea Serpent's Coil, because in reality it does more, but the issue you run into is the snare. So you can get away with Sea Serpent's Coil on this build in duels. You will struggle open world a little bit because of that 40% snare. But besides that, Malekith I think is the best one to go with just because of the 16% flat damage. You don't have to build into any kind of crit, no Shadow Mundus, no Minor Force. You can just have that high consistent dot pressure damage. And one thing to remember is when it comes to dot builds, a lot of times they're going to be hanging around 40, 50, 60% health when you're fighting an enemy. They're not going to be around 80, 90, 100% health. So when you see Bloodthirsty start kicking in, you really do see it. But besides that, let's go into our skills. So we're running Ardent Flame from Dragonknight, Gravelord from Necromancer, and Restoring Light from Templar. For our skills on our front bar, we have Venomous Claw. You can't have a Dragonknight dot build without it. It does dot damage. Now, specifically, it does poison dot damage and increases in damage by 12% every 2 seconds for 24 seconds and applies the poison status effect which will proc our combustion passive. You can run Burning Embers instead, which is the other morph. The main difference here is Burning Embers still does damage. It does less damage than Venomous Claw, but it provides you a heal. So if you want, if you're a newer player, you can run Burning Embers because they'll allow you to make more mistakes, but I personally prefer the more damage route. And generally it just depends what you prioritize on a build. Next we have Blighted Blast Bones. This is huge on the build. So not only do we have an AoE burst ability, but we have an AoE burst ability that applies major and minor defile. So combined with Gerals, this is what prevents people from healing at all in the build. It's completely wonderful. It's completely changed the build, made it way better. Next, we have Noxious Breath. This applies a poison dot in a cone that applies Major Breach for 24 seconds. Major Breach, I would say, is a requirement on all PvP builds. And then the dot is just a bonus, right? More dots is more pressure. Next, we have Flames of Oblivion. It launches 3 fireballs over 15 seconds. It also provides Major Prophecy and Savagery, which will help our critical healing. But since we're running Malakath, the critical damage does help a little bit here with the crit chance, but not as much for the damage. Critical healing does help, critical damage not so much. And then our big damaging ability here is Molten Whip. The main thing with this ability is you want to build up all 3 of your stacks of Seething Fury by using other Ardent Flame abilities. Each stack increases the damage by 20%, so it goes up to 60%. Also, it increases your weapon spell damage by 100. So I generally use Flames of Oblivion or Noxious Breath on the enemy to get all my stacks up before I use it. So just keep that in mind. You need all 3 stacks up to get the most you can out of the ability. Now, sometimes you can get away with 1 or 2 if the person's near death, but generally you want to have all 3. Then, for our ultimate, we have Dawnbreaker Smiting. So it deals instant damage, which is always welcomed, but the dot that lasts for 6 seconds after is what we're really after. So since it does a lot of dot damage, we can swap it out for Thriving Chaos under dual wield if you don't want to farm out Dawnbreaker. But I personally prefer Dawnbreaker just for this AoE CC when I'm outnumbered or if I'm in a BG, because with the Dawnbreaker dot, a lot of people just cannot survive with all the dots that we have. If you have Thrive in Chaos, the instant damage that is on Dawnbreaker, it just makes it impossible. But with Thrive in Chaos, there's no instant damage. It's just pure dot damage. So it's kind of situational which one you want to go with. But I personally just prefer Dawnbreaker or Smiting. Next, we can cover the skills in our back bar. Our first skill in our back bar is my favorite stun of the game, which is Reverberating Bash. You bash someone with your shield and you deal damage, and then when they break free, they take the same amount of damage again. So the damage on this skill is near a regular damage spam bolt while being a stun at the same time. So also, it's one of the only stuns in the game you can run on your back bar that won't impede your damage combo on your front bar. So to put it into perspective, if you run top lane charge or fossilize on your back bar, that takes extra time to bar swap into your damage combo. Now with Reverberating Bash, if you bar swap cancel, let's say into your Molten Whip, it's near instant. So it has better TTK, which is time to kill. And on top of that, I will say in my experience, no one really runs this skill. So when people fight a dot build, they expect the person to run like an ability like Fossilize or Shattering Rocks, which doesn't really have any damage to it. So when they get stunned by a Reverberating Bash, they're not anticipating taking that much damage at first. So when they break free, they're going to be either too low because they didn't prepare to take that extra damage, or they're going to try to turtle up on their back bar instantly, which with all the anti-heal we have and the dots, it won't matter anyway. And the other nice thing about this, since it's a weapon skill, it can also proc our poison. Definitely a strong slept on skill for sure. Next, we have Skeletal Archer. It does a good amount of damage, not an amazing amount. It does increase in damage by 15%, but we're only running it for the Major Brutality and Sorcery buff primarily. Then we have Restoring Focus. It gives us our Major Resolve, which is mandatory on any PvP build and returns 242 stamina back every second. It also heals us every second for 774, but you can also increase it by 200% by standing in the rune. So I chose this skill for the heal and sustain when I was looking at all the major resolve buffs in the game. This one made the most sense since a lot of the times when you're running Gyros, that 15% can affect you. So you need to look at ways to increase your own healing when you're running Gyros, and this is one of the ways I came up with it. And as a dot build, it allows us to turtle up when we need to if we're outnumbered, and kiting's not an option. Just something to keep in mind there. Next, we have Healing Soul from Scribing. It provides an instant burst heal with a small amount of heal over time and Major Vitality for extra healing. Now, the other option could be Honor the Dead from Restoring Light, but you get more out of Healing Soul than you would Honor the Dead. Honor the Dead, the only thing it does is if you're below 75% health and you use it, you get some Mechka back, which isn't bad, but I would much rather have the better heals than the Mechka back. But if you don't have scribing or you don't have the scripts for it, I would strongly encourage just to go with Honor the Dead then. If not, then Healing Soul. Then we have Resolving Vigor. Not much needs to be said about this skill. It's a heal over time that gives mana resolve, extra resistance. Can't go wrong with it. Then for our ultimate, you have a few options here. I go Spell Wall personally under Sword and Shield just because I don't have to worry about my stam, because when you activate this skill, it blocks everything for you automatically with no cost towards your stam bar. And there's been a few situations where I've been hit by like a Toxic Barrage or a Crystal Frag or a Merciless Resolve, and it just gets launched right back at the player, and a lot of times it kills them, or it makes them have to reset, which gives me time to reset, especially if I'm outnumbered. Now, you can run Temporal Guard for the minor protection, or Glacial Colossus for the major vulnerability, or practice Incantation for the group healing. It just depends what you want to run here. So I want to cover the passives from the class skill line, since some of them got buffed and nerfed, and generally how they help with the build. So with Ardent Flame, Combustion was nerfed, and it wasn't nerfed horribly, but pretty bad. So the SAS effect from the poison and the burning was lowered, and then the magicka and stamina that you would normally get back was also lowered. But it's still a generally good passive to have. And then Warmth got buffed, so increasing our dot damage by 6% with all dots, not just Ardent Flame dots, but all dots, as long as you deal direct damage with an Ardent Flame ability, which will be very easy to do, because almost all of our abilities on our front bar, when we apply them, are direct damage. And then it also applies a 30% snare. So all around good. Searing Heat remains unchanged, it just buffs our Noxious Breath and Venomous Claw dots. And then Whirl and Ruin buffs our poison and flame damage abilities by 5%. So almost our whole kit will be affected by this. Very good. And then Restoring Light passives. So we have Mending, which got buffed, because now it affects all heals, not just Restoring Light heals. So this is going to buff our Healing Soul, our Resolving Vigor, and our Restoring Focus. So all around very good there. Sacred Ground is going to give us minor mending from Restoring Focus, and it's going to allow us to block an extra 10% damage. And then Light Weaver doesn't apply to us since we don't have any other Restoring Light healing abilities that can apply to other people. And then Master Ritualist, all it does is lower the time for resurrections, more of like a quality of life buff. And then under Gravelord, this is where the more important buffs are. So we have reusable parts, which will lower the cost of our blast bones by 66%. Very good to have. And then Death Kneel, which will increase our critical strike chance by 20% while the target is under 33% health. While it's nice, but we're running Malekith's Bandit Brutality, so we don't get a lot of value from this. It does help a little bit, but not as much. And then we have Dismember, which is a huge buff. So basically, whenever we have our Skeletal Archer up or our Blast Bones up, we get 3,271 penetration. Really big buff there. And then last we have Rapid Rot, which buffs all of our dots by 10%, which is perfect for this kind of build. Next, let's go over our champion points. So for our Warfare champion points, we have Focus Mending, which is going to buff our Healing Soul, Restoring Focus, and Resolving Vigor heals. Now, you got to keep in mind that we do have Gerals on, so our healing is going to be a little less, so we need to find ways to help counteract that, and this is one of the ways that we do that. Next, we have Ironclad. Most sources of damage in PvP are going to be direct damage, so this is a good way to help counteract that. Then we have Deadly Aim and Mastered Arms, which are going to buff our dots, our reverb, our Molten Whip, our Dawnbreaker, etc. Basically, our whole kit. Then under the fitness champion tree, we have Slippery, which is probably one of the most OP CP buffs in the game, because when we get stunned, it breaks us free of CC instantly for free, then there's no stamina cost. So if you go under your advanced stats, you can see how much it costs for you to break free. On this build, it's going to cost 4,610 stamina. We don't have to worry about that at all then, which that's a lot. So we can just run this and bypass that, and I would run this on all PvP builds, just an FYI. Then we have Survival Instincts. This makes it so that our block, sprint, and roll dodge cost 25% less. Very good to have. Next is going to be Pain's Refuge. We get 2% damage mitigation for every 2 negative effects we have on us, up to 20%. Must have in PvP. And then our last one's going to be Sustained by Suffering. We get 150 magicka, health, and stamina recovery. The health recovery is not a big deal. The magicka and stamina is really nice because we're almost always going to have a negative effect on us. So this is going to help with our recoveries here. And then what we're going to do, we're going to cover the combos next. So you'll want to start by applying your Skeletal Archer, your Restoring Focus, your Healing Soul, and your Vigor. Even though Healing Soul is a burst heal, the heal over time lasts 10 seconds on it, and then the Major Vitality lasts 10 seconds. And then you're casting Vigor just for a little bit of a heal when you swap bars, and for the Minor Resolve. So once you have these 4 buffs up, you'll bar swap, and then you'll cast Light Attack into Noxious Breath, Light Attack into Venomous Claw, Light Attack into Flames of Oblivion, Light Attack into Blast Bones, bar swap, and then when Blast Bones is up, you want to Light Attack into a Reverb so you can stun them right before Blast Bones goes off. Okay, and then the rotation again. This time we're going to use our Molten Whip. So just in case, Noxious Breath, Light Attack, Venomous Claw, Light Attack, Flames of Oblivion, Light Attack, Blast Bones, Light Attack Reverb into a Molten Whip. And then if you have your ultimate, it will be the same thing, but you just don't Molten Whip. So, same thing, Noxious Breath, Venomous Claw, Flames of Oblivion, Blast Bones, Reverb into Dawnbreaker, and then if they're not dead, then you can use your Molten Whip. And to get your Molten Whip stacks up, so you're not reapplying Venomous Claw because you want it to use its whole duration, you can just spam Noxious Breath instead, or you can use Flames of Oblivion. Flames of Oblivion might be a little easier because you don't have to aim it, and it just goes to the person who is ever within range. Remember, it does attack 3 people. But besides that, that is the rotation, guys. If you guys have any questions, let me know in the comments below. I'll answer them as per usual. You guys have a great day and enjoy the clips.
Too cold.